Good morning to you. Mark Suttle with HurricaneTrack.com here. Saturday now, the 9th day of September 2023. Before we get started, a huge, heartfelt thank you to everybody that has expressed their condolences and best wishes and prayers and everything. I mean, no matter what you believe, it's really uplifting to have people that care about you. And what happened over the last couple of weeks watching my father deteriorate was very difficult for all of us. He gave me, as I've mentioned, this whole thing that has brought me to where I am today with his interest in weather and science and just the universe around us. So, yes, he passed yesterday. It was very difficult, but also amazing in its own way, very hard to describe unless you have been through it. But I really do appreciate all the outpouring of just sympathies and warm wishes and whatnot. Definitely means a lot, and it helps. It really does. It helps to know that people really do care. And so there you go. All right, so let's get to it. We know we've got this situation out here with Lee on the one hand. Everybody's worried about that, but then we've got Margot. And how is Margot going to play into the overall situation? So I went with Lee and Margot. It's complicated. Going off that, I'm going to do that on Facebook, right? Where relationship status, it's complicated. Well, here they are on the map, the tracking map, the interactive map over at the Hurricane Track Insider site. And you can see where they both came from. This is very important. Tropical waves coming off of Africa in the main development region. The El Nino not having much of an impact at all. So yes, we are racking up the ACE points. We're going to look at that on Monday. Today I just want to kind of go over a few things related to our two systems and focus on them. But we do have Lee that at one point was a Category 5, and then it really fell apart. I guess it was sort of disheveled in the presence of Margot out there. I guess it got shy as part of that complicated relationship, right? Well, I'm not just tongue-and-cheeking it. The two of them are dealing with different problems. This is the outflow coming from Lee affecting Margot. Lee itself has some shear problems, disheveling what was once a very perfect tropical cyclone engine. And so the two of them kind of dealing with their own matters of the atmosphere right now, keeping them from reaching their maximum potential. But that could change because the atmosphere is always changing. And I think Lee will have a chance to re-strengthen and be a very formidable hurricane, probably somewhere in this zone in the coming days. And then Margot is going to do the same up in this area in the coming days because things don't stay static. They do change. And yes, we do need to keep watching energy that is coming off the coast of Africa in the coming days, but nothing to be concerned with despite what the occasional long-range GFS spits out. You guys know better when you see those things. And I love it when people post that on Twitter and they're like, come on, whatever. Like, don't even post it. You know, they say it's not a forecast or it's 2 weeks out, whatever. Like, don't even post it. I mean, you can look at it. Who am I to tell you what to do? As long as you understand that anything beyond 5 to 7 days is absolutely pointless, even if you're trying to figure out patterns. So we're going to have a hard enough time figuring out the pattern with the troughs and ridges, plus this complicated setup, and it truly is with Lee and Margot. All right? So let's see what's going on with Lee. Well, first of all, a big part of Lee's problem today is the flow is right over the top of it. And that's not good. You need the flow to be very light all around it. It was like that the other day, and it was able to strengthen. And then you can also see the flow is not very favorable. It's coming out and impacting Margot directly. This is way up at the 200 millibar level, and I believe it is. Anyway, at least it shows the shear. One would think that it's up at the 200 millibar level. Maybe it's a different layer of the atmosphere. But bottom line is Lee and Margot both undergoing some shear, and that's what's keeping things in check. Because the ocean temperatures, the thermodynamics, that's all there. The moisture in the atmosphere, might be a little bit of dry air out there, but mostly that's all shaken off and is not a problem. And look, we can see in the forecast discussion, first let's just look at this paragraph here. This is from the 5 a.m. tropical cyclone discussion. And, you know, I'm going to be honest with you folks, I need to refer to this more when I'm doing my updates, especially when we have something that is particularly interesting to people, that it might cause some impacts, this is a very good piece that is written not by AI, unless the forecaster's first name is something with an A and last name with an I. Haha. Seriously though, it's written by a real person. And so it's not template, it's not boilerplate, whatever. That's written by a real person at the National Hurricane Center, because there's a lot of forecasts that are generated, not necessarily by AI, but they're automatic and so forth. This is not. All right? And so you really get into the mind of the forecaster, what they are seeing as they analyze the situation. So mental note, because I used to look at this, these updates have evolved over the years. Definitely want to start going back to these discussions more, and then kind of explaining what each paragraph means when time allows. So firstly, this paragraph up here, I erased my blue pointer. Lee seems to be recovering from the effects of the strong southwesterly shear. Yeah, it's recovering. I guess it's doing a little better. The CDO, or central dense overcast, has expanded. Some deep convection, so forth and so on. Says, due to safety considerations, the aircraft were unable at times to penetrate the eye wall. Yikes. Thus, we have no new in situ information about the intensity. Man, that is not good. Multiple reports of hurricane aircraft mesovortices orbiting around the closed elliptical eye wall. Wow. And that's a meteorological phenomenon. These mesovortices are these very smallish turning areas that really are very dangerous, when they are encountered by aircraft. These aircraft are pretty strong. I think we've only lost one in all of Hurricane Hunter history. And boy, when they can't do that, and these Air Force Reserve folks and the folks from NOAA, they know what they're doing. So that's wow, that's up on the nope factor for me. So very, very glad that we have people that are willing to do that. That being said, we get to this part, that the intensity forecast confidence remains low because global models suggest that Lee could be affected by strong to shear for at least the next day. And we can see that on the CIMSS graphic, SIMS or whatever we call it, University of Wisconsin. Though the European global model shows strong upper level winds near the hurricane for the entire forecast period. The statistical and consensus intensity aids predict that Lee could briefly weaken before re-strengthening in about a day. Only minor adjustments have been made. Generally lies, the forecast does, between the simple and corrected consensus intensity aids. Regardless of the details, I told you it's complicated, it is likely that Lee will continue to be a dangerous hurricane through the next several days. So this goes out to 5 days, right? The forecast, 5 days, still showing a major hurricane, and these numbers here will give us huge swells. So a couple things to note. It'll move well north of the northern Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. So that's good. And it's far enough away that there will not be any bands that come through of any significance. So that concern, I know I've been absent for a couple of days, and I mentioned that a few days ago as a possibility. No, we don't think that's going to be a possibility now. That's pretty obvious. So that's good. But dangerous surf and life-threatening rip currents are affecting portions of those islands, right? They will spread westward and northward, affecting Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Turks, Caicos, Bahamas, and Bermuda through the weekend. So basically, if you can see the water coming at you with those swells, that's coming from Lee. And that can be a real problem. And then, of course, it is way too soon to know about what impacts we could expect anywhere along the East Coast, Atlantic Canada, or Bermuda. However, dangerous rip current surf and so forth. Again, the surf crowd, you're going to really, really like this setup. I know a few people in my circle of friends that are surfers, old and young alike, or young and old alike, whatever. Not me. I like the ocean, but I can't surf. This is going to be a terrific thing for you surfers, but you got to be careful. All right? You have to be really respectful and understanding of the energy that's coming in that Lee is inputting into the ocean. It's amazing to see and fun to surf, I'm sure, but it can be deadly. So what do the models show? Well, there's too many models to get into. This would be an hour and a half, and this is not a long format podcast. We want to get through this. So I'm focusing right now, let's just look at the wind field, the lower 10-meter wind. So that's about 33 feet up or something like that. And, of course, the mean sea level pressure. It's not 983. It's much stronger than that intensity-wise. So don't worry about what the GFS shows on that. There's Margot, by the way, and the wind field that the GFS is analyzing here. So let's move this out through time, through day 7. I think that's reasonable since the tropical weather outlook goes out that far. So here's 2 days out, and then finally 3 days out. Notice how the wind field expands, and we knock off 30 millibars on the pressure. I said don't pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to the number. Pay attention to the trend. As we go back, maybe we can see that Lee goes from 983 or whatever, and then it strengthens really quickly. It loses about 30 millibars there to 954 in 72 hours. So that's important that it does show strengthening considerably, as well as it strengthens Margot over here to the east. We'll get to why Margot is important in just a couple minutes. So Lee comes around, makes it almost to 70 degrees longitude. That's important. I love the fact that you can mouse over this and get the lat long. That's great. And so 25.6 and rounded up to 25.7, and then 68 basically is the longitude roughly. 70 west means that if it went due north and never ever lost longitude, that it would impact Cape Cod directly. 70 west. You understand that? So we're only talking about 120 miles, and that's just Cape Cod. You still have the Gulf of Maine up here, Nova Scotia, and sure, it can curve around, but we have to watch this. We're starting to get a little concerned about some direct impacts for the Northwest Atlantic land masses. But before that, this is going to get close enough to Bermuda, which is right there. And let's change the domain here, the map extent. There's Bermuda, and Bermuda would be on the east side with some very strong south-southeast to southerly winds really lashing that part of the islands, and Bermuda's not just one island. So keep an eye on that. I know you are, all of you that I know over there personally. Jay and Howard both come to mind, amongst others, and any other interest. This is not going to be a nothing situation, and you don't need a direct hit for there to be some impacts. And depending on how this wind field evolves, this could be a pretty big deal. Yeah, they're built solid over there, so I say a big deal. You'll feel it. All right, so just please keep that in mind. And Bermudans, they know. You know that, what is those things people say on memes and whatnot? If you know, you know. Bermudans definitely know. So that's 130. This is 6 days. This is rounded up. And remember what I talked about. There's your longitude. You can clearly see there's Cape Cod in the center of Lee. Lost a little bit of longitude, so that's a little bit encouraging. But what's really going to be important is how Margot, this big old high, this is at the surface, and we're talking about deep layers of the atmosphere, and then a weakness over here in the upper atmosphere, and then the surface high. All these pieces matter. They really do. And I don't really understand too much about proximity and speed and whatnot of Margot. I just do know that two spaces can't occupy, or two masses can't occupy the same space. And if they were to get really close, one would absorb the other. There's no such thing as combining into a Jupiter-like big red storm or whatever, the red eye on Jupiter. No, that doesn't happen. One absorbs the other. But we're not even talking about that. They're not going to be that close. But they could be close enough that they could start to affect each other, because between them is high pressure. There's so much going on. That's why I said it's complicated. This is not your typical Lee's going to go around the western part of the Atlantic Ridge, wherever it is, and we'll see where that corridor goes. Margot has a role in this, and it's really too soon to know how that role will evolve. And on one run, like we see here, this is day 6, and then finally by day 7, this run, it gets pretty darn close to land masses of the Northwest Atlantic, and the wind field is big enough that there will be impacts. Cape Cod, just verbatim, a week out, would be getting tropical storm force winds if this were to be exact. But if Margot is farther to the northwest, there's so many ifs. You guys know. Hopefully you do. And so we're going to have to just wait and see. And if it gains more longitude, in other words, more westward extent earlier, then it's really going to have to turn harder. Conversely, it could be farther to the east, and then Bermuda is more at risk for possible hurricane conditions. So, a week out's a long time. The 5-day forecast only gets us to about right here. So in 5 days, it's going to be a pretty intense hurricane. And boy, the swells that this is going to generate are really going to be something. We're going to focus on that even more starting next week. The euro, let me refresh this. This is the 6Z euro. That was what the GFS was showing as well. And this is only going out to 90 hours on the 6Z full frame. And it's trying to gain some longitude. It also strengthens considerably. You can see that? See, it shows it kind of petering out and weakening right now. And then it strengthens again, loses 30 millibars as well. So there is consensus between the GFS and the euro that it would strengthen and deepen by 30 millibars. That's pretty significant. So in 90 hours, the euro has it over at about 66. What about the GFS at 90 hours, just to compare? GFS has it at about 67. So the GFS is a little bit further to the west, and you can see how that works. It's to the west and north a little bit. So, it's going to be complicated. Like I said, we don't really know, and I wish we did, because we would tell you. So we got to watch, but we have to also focus on what's in front of us, and that first set of impacts for the areas I talked about are going to be the swells and the dangerous surf conditions, and that is no joke. All right, that's not manufactured to get people to click or watch or whatever. The surf can kill you. It really can, especially when you get these big breaking waves in that surf zone. My wife works in emergency medicine. Several of my adult kids do now, and they see it. They do. They get neck and back injuries, and you folks that go to the water enough, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you're going to get these red flags going up. You need to heed that. You just need to be careful, because you expressed your outpouring of caring to me recently. I have said it many times that, hey, look, I would still do this video even if I was a billionaire and had all the whatever in the world and 1 billion followers. Sure, I care about you guys. And so that's why I translate what I have seen with my own 2 eyes, these big swells over the years, and what they can do to people. So please keep that in mind. We do have impacts now, and that is more important than category or where it's going in the longer term, because we don't know those answers. Right now, we know what's in front of us. Alrighty? Alrighty. Well, that is it from me for this morning. I'm going to hit the gym. I desperately need it for a number of reasons. Been doing that for several months, by the way, and it makes me just feel better. So for those of you that do that, you would probably agree. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to have some family time today, and I will be back with you tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in. Again, thanks for all the condolences and whatnot. My family and I really appreciate it, as does my father. And I told him, too, in those last couple of days about all the people that were rooting for him. So you guys have a great rest of your Saturday. I am Mark Sudduth for all of us here at Hurricane Track. I'll see you tomorrow.